Thank you, guys. It was a nice occasion. I'm really pleased. So I have a smile on my face and have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mabuhay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Mabuhay for the
Bye.
Philippines.
Thank you, Pat.
Yeah, thank you, Christian, and thank you, Patrik Schumacher.
Hello.
You and Zaha did very inspiring work, because your buildings are always unique, memorable, and identifiable, but they don't overwhelm the city. Somehow.
So we have a number of these projects where the primary driver is shading, sun exposure, but here it's also breeze and wind. So that's the project in Saudi Arabia, very harsh climate as well. And this we use that. And also what you get is that these projects get a sense of regional embeddedness. But I wanted to show the subsidiary stages and styles of parametricism. One I'm calling foldism, the idea of having these continuous, modulated and fluid single surfaces. So this idea of having smooth transitions and gradient transformations and using a surface to structure space rather than having dissection into discrete objects. And there the examples, you can see this kind of transitioning from vertical to horizontal surfaces. Everything is brought under that formalism, and therefore you can get a lot of variation and nuance. There are many more examples, of course, and I wanted to show you this as well. So this still continues to be a paradigm. The latest project, cultural complex in Changcha, where we have the landscape and the architectural forms, all this, let's say, surface and folding surface condition. I mean, again, an auditorium is an interesting example. So that's...
We are currently streaming live at UAP 124 LLC Facebook page. Kindly share our live stream with hashtag UAP with Zaha. Nothing can be more exciting but to give back to our community. For every share you make, the collaborating chapters will be donating 15 pesos to 4 selected community pantries: San Pablo City, Cebu, Malolos, and Manila Sampaloc. Share the live stream. Help refill the community pantry.
This event is made possible by these collaborating chapters: Abu Dhabi, Aklan, Boracay, Balanga, Bataan, Bataan Peninsulares, Cebu City, Daraga, Cagsawa, 124 Dubai, KSA Eastern Province, KSA Riyadh, KSA Western Region, Kuwait, Malolos Republica, Manila Artizonian, Manila Sampaloc, Oman, Palawan, Quezon City Silangan, Quezon City Puget-Lawin, Quezon Province, Rizal Kalayaan 100, San Pablo City, UAPSA, and UAPSA National University.
Hello dear participants. Upon entry, kindly turn on your video and please rename your profile in all caps with your chapter without the UAP word, /your name, /the surname. For example, Oman /Michael /Ranyola. Thank you.
To receive your certificate of attendance, please be informed of the following requirements. 1 is to pass the assessment test, which will be given after the program. 2, you will have 30 minutes to answer the 10 questions and submit your response. Please take note that it will take around 2 to 3 weeks for the organizers to check, evaluate, and release the certificates. For updates, kindly check the collaborating chapter's social media account. List of passers and certificates will be officially released or posted at uap124.org/cpd. Thank you.
Mula sa mga lupon ng mga arkitektong Pilipino sa Pilipinas at gitnang silangan. Si CP Christian ng Dubai, CP Gerald ng KSA Eastern Province, CPJ Abu Dhabi, at CP Yen ng San Pablo City.
Magandang araw Pilipinas at buong mundo. Ngayon ay buwan ng Mayo, taong 2021. Ito ang Chapter News Update.
Dubai, 4,000 trabaho ang naipost na sa Facebook Jobs page. Daraga kag sawa, 1,000 UAP DCC Trees program inulunsad sa Albay. KSA East, 8 libreng webinars na ilunsad na.
Aklan, Boracay, 2 CPD seminars ngayong Mayo, alamin. Bataan Peninsulares, Archi-Sketchers at iba pang programa para sa mga miyembro, abangan. San Pablo City, fundraising at restoration project para sa baptistry sa San Pablo Cathedral, sisimulan na.
Abu Dhabi, Eid Award, 10 taon na patuloy ang pagtulong sa ating mga kababayan. Malolos Republika, grupo ng mga arkitekto kinumisyong magdisenyo ng kauna-unahang skate park at Freedom Wall sa Malolos. QC Silangan, flu vaccine drive para sa miyembro at kapamilya. Alamin. Cebu, online show na home makeover sa Cebu, Pananabikan. Balitang wagi, mga chapter na humakot ng parangal sa katatapos lang na UAP Awards 2021. Sino-sino?
Magandang araw, tayo ay sabayang napapanood sa ating Facebook at YouTube account. At una sa ating mga chapter news update, makibalita tayo kay CP Christian ng Dubai.
Salamat CPJ ng Abu Dhabi. Mula nang inilunsad ang UAP Mina Jobs Facebook page noong nakaraang taon, umabot na sa 4,000 trabaho ang naipost. Ayon sa Dubai General Welfare Committee, mayroong mahigit 1,000 trabaho para sa arkitekto, 1,000 trabaho para sa 3D visualizers at interior designers, at 2,000 trabaho ang naipost na para sa site supervisions, construction managers, at iba pa. Makakaasa hindi lamang ang mga miyembro ng Dubai, kundi pati na rin ang mga nasa Pilipinas at gitnang silangan sa patuloy na pagtulong ng ating mga volunteer leaders sa mga naghahanap ng bagong oportunidad sa ating mga miyembro. Lubos na nagpapasalamat ang committee sa walang sawang pagsuporta mula sa iba't ibang miyembro ng UAP na nagre-rekomenda sa ating mga kapwa UAP. Sa mga may alam pang bakanting posisyon sa kanilang mga opisina, makipagbigay alam lamang sa committee o bisitahin ang UAP Mina Jobs Facebook page. Mula sa UAP Dubai Chapter, ito ang Chapter News Update.
Narito naman ang balita mula sa Bicol Region. Ang United Architects of the Philippines, Daraga Cagsawa Chapter, ay naglunsad ng programang 1,000 UAP DCC trees para sa Albay, kung saan ang grupong ito ay magtatanim ng mahigit 300 puno bawat taon. Nauna na silang nagtanim ng 100 Nara trees sa Barangay Alubo sa Daraga at inaasahang magtatanim pa ng 200 puno bago matapos ang buwan ng Hunyo. Ang mga aktibidad ng grupong ito ay nakasentro hindi lamang sa pagprotekta ng kanilang propesyon, kundi sa pagtulong na rin na mapaganda ang ating komunidad at mailigtas ang ating mundo sa pagkasira ng kalikasan. Inaasahang matatapos ang pagtatanim ng 1,000 puno sa loob ng 3 taon. Mula sa UAP Daraga Kagsawa Chapter, ito ang Chapter News Update.
8 libreng webinar na ilunsad sa KSA East ngayong fiscal year 2020-2021. 5 sa mga ito ay may kaukulang CPD points. Karamihan sa mga speakers ng nasabing webinar ay nagmula mismo sa KSA East. Ito ay kinabibilangan nila Architect Chof Asis, Architect Regalado Hasmin, Architect Darwin Fondano, Architect Brian Adorable, Architect Renato Lat, at Architect Dennis Angeles. Meron ding mga kilalang arkitekto katulad ni Architect Royal Penada, Architect Cecil K. Mandamana, at Architect Robert Sa. Ang mga kasapi ng KSA East ay tuwang-tuwa na sila ay natuto at nadagdagan ang kanilang mga kaalaman ngayong fiscal year 2020-2021 sa tulong ng mga webinars na ito na libreng ipinagkaloob ng KSA East CPD team sa pamumuno ni Architect Gali Hasmi. Mula sa UAP KSA Eastern Province Chapter, ito ang Chapter News Update.
Para naman sa balitang panayanon, 2 CPD webinar ang inihanda ng Aklan Boracay Chapter para sa kanilang mga miyembro. Nitong 2 ng Mayo, inilunsad ang The Digital Architect Workshop na may layuning maturuan ang mga miyembro na makakuha ng proyekto sa pamamagitan ng social media. Malaki ang may tutulong nito na maiangat ang kabuhayan ng mga nagsisimula pa lamang ng mga arkitekto, lalo na sa panahon ng pandemya. Ang speaker sa webinar na ito ay ang tinaguriang The Digital Architect na si Architect JP Espino. Ito ay nilahukan ng iba pang mga arkitekto mula sa iba't ibang UAP chapter. Samantala, sa ika-22 ngayong buwan, ay gaganapin naman ang Dare to Lead, Purposeful Chapter Leadership. Layunin ng webinar na ito ang maitaguyod ang mas mahusay na pamamahala sa bawat chapter ng UAP at makatulong na makahubog pa ng mas marami pang leader sa ating organisasyon. Ang speaker sa webinar na ito ay si Architect Richie Tumambing ng Lipa Chapter. Ang leadership webinar ay bahagi ng District C4 Assembly na ginaganap buong buwan ng Mayo. Muli, inaanyayahan ng lahat ng gustong dumalo na magpa-register at puntahan lamang ang District C4 Facebook page para sa karagdagang detalye. Mula sa UAP Aklan Boracay, ito ang Chapter News Update.
Sa isa na namang nagbabagong balita, nagsagawa ng isang pagpupulong ng mga miyembro ang Bataan Archi-Sketchers. Itinalaga ang Archi-Sketchers na nagmula dito sa Bataan Peninsulares Chapter upang mapagtibay ang samahan ng mga talentadong individual sa larangan ng urban sketching. Bukas, Mayo 22 ng alas 2 dito sa ating Pilipinas, isasagawa ang naturang proyekto. Bukod dito, magsasagawa ang Bataan Peninsulares ng isang bike and ride event for a cause. Ang malilikom dito ay ibabahagi sa mga taong nangangailangan sa pamamagitan ng isang community pantry. Mula sa UAP Bataan Peninsulares, ito ang Chapter News Update.
Balita mula sa chapter ng Pitong Lawa. Ang UAP San Pablo Chapter ay maglulunsad ng isang proyekto sa restorasyon at pagpapaganda ng lugar pabinyagan o baptistry ng St. Paul I Hermit. Ang nabanggit na baptistry ay nasa ilalim ng belfry o kampanaryo na sinasabing orihinal na parte pa ng parokya. At sa pagsasagawa ng isang fundraising virtual concert, inaasahang makalikom ng sapat na pondo upang makatulong at maisakatuparan ang restorasyon. Hangarin ng arkitektong San Pableño ay makabilang sa gawain para sa bayan at upang maipakita ang talento at serbisyo hatid ng ating profesyon. Mula sa UAP San Pablo Chapter, ito ang Chapter News Update.
Bayan, 10 taon nang sinimulan ng UAP Abu Dhabi Chapter ang EID Award. Layunin nito na matugunan ang mga kaagyat na pangangailangan ng ating mga kababayan na pansamantalang nanunuluyan sa Embahada ng Pilipinas sa Abu Dhabi. Mahigit 700 na kabayan ang nabahaginan ng tulong mula sa pagkakawanggawa ng mga miyembro ng Chapter 1, 2, 3. At sa taong ito, lubos na nagpapasalamat ang ating mga volunteers at muli ay nagawang maghatid ng saya sa ating mga kababayang nangangailangan ng pagkalinga. Mula sa UAP Abu Dhabi Chapter, ito ang Chapter News Update.
Balitang Central Luzon. Isang grupo ng mga arkitekto sa bayan ng Malolos, Bulacan, ang UAP Malolos Republica Chapter, ang kinumisyon ng punong lungsod na magdisenyo ng kauna-unahang pampublikong parke sa mga manlalaro ng skateboard. Inaasahan sa proyektong ito na mabibigyan ng tamang lugar ang mga skater ng lungsod na makapaglaro ng ligtas at makaiwas sa sakuna. Kasama sa proyektong ito ang karagdagang amenities tulad ng mga wall climbing at rappelling, pader ng kalayaan sa pamamagitan ng pagsusulat, emotional or anger wall na maaaring gamitin upang magbasag ng bote, baso, pinggan at iba pa upang maibsan ang galit at kalungkutan. Inaasahang magiging patok sa mga turista at lokal na Maloleño ang nasabing atraksyon. Mula UAP Malolos Republica, ito ang Chapter News Update.
Salamat CP Jaime ng Malolos Republica. Dumako naman po tayo sa Balitang Sila. Nagpaplanong magsagawa ng flu vaccine drive ang liderato ng chapter. Layo nitong paigtingin ang proteksyon bilang unang depensa laban sa COVID-19. Inaasahan po na ang mga miyembro at kanilang mga pamilya ang magiging benepisyaryo ng flu vaccine drive na ito. Bilang paghahanda, nangangalap na ng mga vaccine provider upang mapabilis ang inaasahang pagbabakuna at magkaroon ng budgetary allocation para sa kampanyang ito. Inaasahang ito ay magbibigay tulong sa lahat upang magkaroon ng karagdagang depensa at proteksyon para mapanatiling malakas at malusog ang bawat isa. Mula sa UAP Sisilangan, ito ang Chapter News Update.
Makikipag-partner ang UAP Cebu sa interdisciplinary duo na ang Design Divas. Ang kanilang misyon ay magpagbigay ng libreng home makeover sa mga karapat-dapat na benepisyaryo. Para sa kanilang ikaunang season, 4 na benepisyaryo mula sa Cebu City ang pipiliin. Dahil iilan sa kanila ay mangangailangan ng expertise ng arkitekto, dito naman makakatulong ang UAP Architects. Maaari niyo mapanood ang Design Divas sa kanilang FB page at sa kanilang YouTube channel. Kasalukuyan din nasa production ang Payag Home Makeover Series, partnership ng UAP Cebu kasama ang Terwilliger Center for Innovation in Shelter at HNC o Hot News Channel. Layunin nito ang turuan ang kanilang mga viewers kung paano gumawa ng mga matibay at pangmatagalan na bahay. Ang show ay bilingual na nasa wikang Cebuano at Ingles at pagtutunan ng pansin ang socio-economic brackets C at D o yung mga gumagawa ng DIY sa kanilang bahay. Abangan ang Payag Home Makeover Series ngayong taon. Hangad ng mga show na to na itaguyod ang mga profesyon ng AEC industry habang magbibigay ng professional na serbisyo sa kanilang mga benepisyaryo. Mula sa UAP Cebu, ito ang Chapter News Update.
At para naman sa Balitang Wagi, kamakailan lang ay dinaos ang UAP National Awards nito lamang katatapos ng 46th National Convention for Architects nitong April 24, 2021. Tatlo sa mga katapi ng ating collaborating chapters ay nabigyan ng pinakaasam na parangal ng taon. Kabilang sa 3 chapters na nakatanggap ng parangal ay ang UAP 124 Dubai Chapter, UAP Daraga Kagsawa Chapter, at ang UAP KSA Eastern Province Chapter. Tuwang-tuwa ang Keeper of the Best, UAP 124 Dubai Chapter, sapagkat nasungkit nilang muli sa ikatlong pagkakataon ang Best Chapter Award for Foreign Base Group 1. Magiging inspirasyon ito ng UAP 124 sa patuloy na pagbibigay ng libre at dekalidad na serbisyo at paglilingkod hindi lamang sa mga kasapi ng UAP 124, kundi maging sa buong kapulungan ng United Architects of the Philippines. Sa kabilang dako naman ay tuwang-tuwa din ang UAP Daraga Kagsawa Chapter sa pagkakapanalo nito hindi lamang ng isa, kundi 2 sa pinakamahalagang parangal ng taon. Nasungkit sa ikalawang pagkakataon ng UAP Daraga Kagsawa Chapter ang Best Chapter President Award, puno ng walang iba kundi ang ating pretty face, CP Ana Capuno. At ang ikalawang parangal naman ay ang kanilang Best Chapter Award for Local Base Group 1. Tuwang-tuwa ang UAP Daraga Kagsawa Chapter sa parangal na ito at ganun din naman ay magsisilbi itong inspirasyon para sa kanila sa patuloy pa nilang pagpupunyagi na makapagbigay serbisyo hindi lamang sa mga arkitekto kundi sa mga pamayanang kanilang naaabot. Makulitan sa gitnang silangan sa kauna-unahang pagkakataon at sa panahon pa ng pandemya ay nasungkit din ng UAP KSA Eastern Province Chapter ang pinakaasam nito na Best Chapter Award for Foreign Base Group 2. Tuwang-tuwa ang buong kapulungan ng UAP KSA EPC sa natamong tagumpay at parangal nito lamang katatapos na UAP National Awards. Magsisilbi itong inspirasyon ng chapter sa patuloy pang pagpupunyagi na maging maayos ang chapter at ganun din ang prosesyon ng arkitektura at ng United Architects of the Philippines sa kabuuan. At ito ang Chapter News Update.
At yan ang mga balitang ating nalakap sa bawat UAP chapter.
Kami ang inyong chapter presidents,
voluntaryong naglilingkod
para sa mga Pilipinong arkitekto. At ito ang
Chapter News Update.
The Architect's Credo is a compendium of principles, beliefs, and values that architects are expected to adhere to in the conduct of their personal and professional dealings.
Dear Global Filipino Architects, please raise your right hand and recite the Architect's Credo.
I shall work with this general objective that I am accountable to God, to Mother Earth, to my country, to my fellow men, and to myself.
I shall uphold the ideals and follow the norms and ethical conduct of this profession.
I shall pursue moral and professional excellence to the most utmost level of integrity through industrious dedication and meaningful application of my work that merits a reputation for quality of services worthy of fair remuneration.
I shall pledge myself
To the highest standard of professionalism in relation to clients, colleagues, industry partners, and society.
shall dedicate myself to pursuit of creative endeavor towards the goal of enlightened art and science, generously sharing it.
I shall respect the rights and works of my colleagues in the profession and confine my comments to the constructive intents.
I shall endeavor to do my duty in the protection of our common environment
and the
preservation of architectural heritage
for the sake of the present and future generation.
So help me God.
So help me God. So help me God.
So help me God.
In this UAP 2021 talks, master architects, designers, innovation leaders, research experts, product developers, and business leaders share their vision, inspiration, and take part in bold conversations about redefining what it means to be an architect in this day and age. We are entering a new age in architecture, one where we expect our buildings to deliver far more than just a shelter. We want buildings that inspire us while helping the environment. Buildings that delight our senses while serving the needs of the community. This free online event is open to all and aimed at architects, urban designers, planners, and architecture students wishing to gain the intellectual, theoretical, and practical knowledge and skills essential to understanding and shaping the future city. An overview of the design practices, methodologies, and vision that responds to the current and future trend of needs. My fellow architects, this is UAP 2021 Talks powered by collaboration with 21 UAP chapters, UAPCA and UAPSA National University.
All right. Our guest speaker today is the principal of Hadid Architects. He joined Hadid in 1988 and was seminal in developing Hadid Architects to become a 400-strong global architecture and design brand. He studied philosophy, mathematics, and architecture in Bonn, Stuttgart, and London. He received his diploma in architecture in 1990. He has been a partner since 2003 and a co-author on all projects. In 2010, he won the Royal Institute of British Architects Sterling Prize for Excellence in Architecture together with Hadid for MAXI, the National Italian Museum for Art and Architecture of the 21st Century in Rome. He is an academician of the Berlin Academy of Arts. In 1996, he founded the Design Research Laboratory at the Architectural Association in London, where he continues to teach. In 1999, he completed his PhD at the Institute for Cultural Science at Klagenfurt University. He's lecturing worldwide and recently held the John Portman Chair in Architecture at Harvard's Graduate School of Design. Over the last 20 years, he has contributed over 100 articles to architectural journals and anthologies. In 2008, he coined the phrase parametricism and has since published a series of manifestos promoting parametricism as the new epochal style for the 21st century. In 2010-2012, he published his 2-volume theoretical opus magnum, The Autopoiesis of Architecture. He is widely recognized as one of the most prominent thought leaders within the field of architecture, urbanism, and design. My fellow global Filipino architects, colleagues, students, for the first time at United Architects of the Philippines, please welcome Patrik Schumacher. Patrik, the Zoom is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be lecturing in the Philippines. It's my first time. And so I prepared a lecture. I've changed the title. I'm going to talk about Tectonism, which is the latest stage of parametricism and what we are working on right now and over the more recent years. And so I'm intending to talk about 1 hour, maybe a little bit more, and then we can have a Q&A. So the overall time frame I've allocated is 1.5 hours. I hope that it's okay with you guys.
That's totally fine, Patrik.
Let me try to share my screen. Okay. So Tectonism is the contemporary style I'm promoting. It is not in contradiction, but it's an extension and a subsidiary style to parametricism. And the subtitle is Engineering and Fabrication Logic as Stylistic Drivers. I will start with this image to show also that this is not only Hadid architects, it's the movement of parametricism with many authors, friends and colleagues in various research institutes are developing the style and this new paradigm as a subsidiary paradigm, as I said, to parametricism. So these works are partially our works of various other authors, and also some historical precedents one could name. And you can see here immediately the diversity of morphologies, of geometries, textures, and structural articulation compared with an earlier stage of parametricism, which was more smooth and primarily NURB surfaces. The background behind this is, first of all, new optimization tools in engineering, but also new fabrication potentials. Here I'm showing you robotic fabrication with extruders in plastic and clay and concrete, etc. So these are examples from Hadid architects. So Tectonism implies the stylistic heightening of engineering fabrication-based form finding and optimization processes. So there's a strong technological and engineering rationality which drives this, but it is also, for me, important to note that this enlarges the expressive and communicative capacity of the discipline, because there's this rich diversity of strong, recognizable morphologies and identities. I think we need that variety and intricacy of articulation to express the complexity and the variety in the built environment in a systematic way. So that's the underlying.
Patrik, we're seeing in the screen the full PowerPoint.
Oh, really? Wait, let me do something here. You see the full PowerPoint, you don't see the slides?
No.
Okay. Let me try this. Let's see what happens now. What are you seeing now? Okay, wait, I need to redo that screen sharing.
Yep. There you go.
Yeah, that's the full.
Yeah.
So I was talking about, this is two examples of robotic fabrication with extruders similar to 3D printing, additive manufacturing. And you can see here there's a new aesthetic evolving, coming out of that, but it's only one example of many new fabrication processes and materials which are coming, you know, into our discipline, and it enlarges the expressive repertoire. It enlarges the rationality and of intricate adaptive design solution, but it also enlarges what is very important for me, the expressive power of architecture. Wait, okay, now. So I was saying before that Tectonism implies a stylistic heightening of engineering and fabrication-based form finding and optimization processes. Now, so before I go into the more theoretical part, I just want to share two projects which belong into that field. This is a cluster of small houses and some public spaces in Honduras. It's a little colony and the first seeding of a colony of, which is called Honduras Prospera. And what is quite nice about this, it is, you know, it has a lot of tectonic expressive elements in timber vaults as well, and it has the idea of a configurator where an online interface would allow people to select voxel offerings in a three-dimensional space, and then there's a system of parts, kit of parts, to then translate that into these kind of tailored houses, and then we're getting a result which is complex, intricate, but also efficient and quick to build. So it's a kind of parametric modularity where the modular isn't implying a repetitive expression, but a kind of tailored expression, because the modules are quite varied and they're also tectonically expressive. So I just wanted to share that. It's a new project we're currently working on, and it is I feel it kind of could also fit into the Philippines, into some of the landscapes and climates there. It's very similar. It's Middle America, it's Honduras, with a lot of exterior spaces, intimate terraces and covered spaces, shaded spaces. And it's based on relatively small modules. So these units are not larger than maybe 50 square meters. But sometimes we utilize also the height, which comes out through the kind of terrace stacking with internal double height and triple height spaces. So I wanted to show that, and then I want to show something of a very different scale, what we call the New London. It's something which I'm doing with AADRL, Design Research Lab, my students there, and I'll show you later more details of it. It's going to give you an overview now of the idea of densifying London between the City of London, which is the current CBD financial cluster, and Canary Wharf. There's some zones, quite low-rise zones, and to really build up a kind of strong high-rise with a lot of ground activation, a lot of layeredness, and towers with atria and bridges to create a kind of three-dimensional urban web. And you can see the attempt to activate the towers on multiple levels with the hotel, for instance, gym and spa zone or other terraces. And we'll come to that later. You can see the kind of tectonic expression, a strong expression of skeletons, exoskeletons, which allow for the internal freedom of voiding out for terraces, for atria. And we have some examples of that later as well. So the vision of a new London potentially in the East. And there are different sub-districts which come together. So the way I work with my students, they form teams, and then multiple teams come together to form an urban district. So Tectonism, as I said, is a movement. It has matured over the last 10 years and is becoming that subsidiary style, I would say, of the contemporary condition, best representing. But it's a very sophisticated, very difficult. So there's not many large-scale examples yet, and also in a firm like ours, it's not easy to jump on that style. So I wanted to first talk a little bit about parametrism as an epochal style. I'm distinguishing epochal styles. These are long-lasting styles which match up with a particular historical epoch in the development of, let's say, socioeconomic systems and technological eras, if you like. So we have, the Renaissance, the Baroque, We have historicism of the 19th century, modernism in the 20th century, and I think Parametricism in the 21st century. But then there's also transitional styles between eras. So, from historicism to modernism, we had Art Nouveau and Expressionism as temporary experimental conditions. Then we had also between modernism and Parametricism, we had postmodernism and deconstructivism, for instance. So we have that transitional styles, which are usually, relatively short. All of these styles here are about a decade long. And then we have, but also within these larger epochal styles, we have subsidiary styles. For instance, modernism, we started with the white modernism of the early Bauhaus, and then there was a development of brutalism in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. We have then metabolism. We have high tech, but they all fit within the very fundamental principles of modernism. And the same, we can start to observe for Parametricism, which is now already evolving for the last 25 years. But I wanted to show the subsidiary stages and styles of Parametricism. One I'm calling foldism, the idea of having these continuous, modulated and fluid single surfaces. So this idea of having smooth transitions and gradient transformations, and using a surface to structure space rather than having dissection into discrete objects. And there are the examples. You can see this kind of transitioning from vertical to horizontal surfaces. Everything is brought under that formalism, and if we can get a lot of variation and nuance. There are many more examples, of course, and I wanted to show you this as well. So this still continues to be a paradigm. The latest project, Cultural Complex in Changcha, where we have the landscape and the architectural forms, all this, let's say, surface and folding surface condition. I mean, again, an auditorium is an interesting example. So that's foldism. It's a subsidiary style. It was the first kind of version of Parametricism, if you like. And then we work with these, we soon develop these kind of blobs. As if you work with closed volumes, what is nice and interesting that these volumes can become complex when you aggregate various spaces and they're partially fused. So it's kind of complex, intricate form, which is the fusion of multiple spaces, and the spheric or blob-like contours help to recognize the various parts still within the overall. And there's a strong sense of maintaining legibility in the face of complexity. And I think that's been an important paradigm, similar to foldism, where instead of having discrete spaces, these spaces bleed into each other. And you can experience this on the outside as well as on the inside. There are various examples of that in our build work, particularly the Galaxy project in Beijing. I wanted to show also a new project which still fits within that. It's a cluster tower in Shenzhen for Oppo. So it's again, it's a headquarter building with multiple parts, departments, and instead of having separate towers or one huge mega tower, we're articulating the parts, and yet at the same time let them bleed into each other. And the nice thing here as well, there's these kind of hollow blobs, carved out spaces, atria, in various conditions. And also on the inside, you get this kind of continuous flow of furnishings, of open office, and then also sectionally these various atriums. You get visual intervisibility, inter-awareness across levels. That's very important to us. And you can see here that we're pulling something we learned from Richard Rogers, we're pulling the cores to the side to get that large playing field, open playing field. The moment we are in finished SD and moving into DD detailing of this project. So the third, then we came to this condition where I think it's about 12 years ago or so at least. I call it swarmism. It's very good for urbanism. Basically, the idea of having parametric components. There was a software by Bentley early on called generative components, where we can set up a parametric model and then we can distribute it across the surface and then let the correlate it with various surface features and let it be modulated, continuously varied. And these could be complex forms. They could be facade elements, or they could be whole buildings which are varied across the surface. And that would be helpful to adapt the element to the different, for instance, sun exposure condition, or maybe also different interior conditions potentially, as well as in an urban way to adapt to different, to affiliate, rerun this word, nice, to affiliate to the existing fabric, and then to transition into, you know, very different conditions of very high and larger volumes, or into clearings and open spaces. So you get an internal differentiation, and you get adaptive affiliation as the key advantages. And usually, if you do here, if you would add a district, you would have these two towns, and now they kind of blend in and have continuities with the new district. In a modernist condition, you would have just added a third element, which would be radically different in scale and condition, and internally repetitive. So, I mean, this idea of swarms of furnishings, swarms of buildings, we've used that a lot. I mean, that was basically the principle of what I called at the time parametric urbanism. That still continues. But again, swarmism, we're now having a slightly different methodology for our urban projects. We are thinking of a much less of an overall master plan, but much more about an organic bottom-up process of multi-author creation. But that would rely on, you get much more diversity, but it would only work if all those authors share a set of values and principles, the principles of parametricism. So I'm showing here, this is a project we're currently working on. We're doing that whole so-called unicorn island in Chengdu. It's a big startup cluster, incubation, let's say industry district, and where these kind of ideas are being translated into reality right now. So this is under construction in Chengdu. So just to summarize, parametricism, the three subsidiary styles, foldism, blobism, and swarmism, they all share this idea of what I call that the elements are parametrically variable, hence parametricism, that we then have, as we proliferate the elements, they would really create continuity differentiated fields. And we would reject both hermetic and discrete objects, as well as the random agglomeration of unrelated objects. There's kind of a strong element of relating the elements. And tectonism is the latest in that sequence. And I will talk about that today, what that implies. So again, I'm showing you that image. The variety is very different. And we wanted to bring this kind of variety into, if not a single building, into an urban district. But you can see here, variety is at the same time, there is coherency in principle. So this idea of tectonics, which underlies tectonism, is very traditional and long and old, which means basically that the way buildings are put together, these, for instance, kind of masonry building and with these, let's say, arching window sills, lintels, sorry, they become a stylistically heightened expressive feature in the building. rather than being hidden and covered over, for instance, with plaster and then have a painted ornament on it. It's actually the material geometry is heightened and becomes a kind of expressive feature and ornament which gives character and legibility. So we have to distinguish structural rationality, environmental rationality, and fabrication rationality as those three most important aspects which Tectonism would work with to develop these morphologies. And again, I think in the Gothic you have that, you know, you have the vaulting, it's the global form, and then you have the ribbing, which is a way of making it a lighter vault, so not having that, you know, depth only in the ribs, and you get, you know, a beautiful expressive sensation. And of course in the Gothic it also, these things became also ornamental in this through their own right, and you get different versions of this. And it's very clear that there is structure becomes ornament here. And what I mean by ornament is a semiological characterization, giving a special recognizability and character and festiveness sometimes to these spaces. So we're looking at that closely, and there's a lot of variety, but they're all full of, you know, sound structural principles. And it goes even down to the infilling brick courses or stone. This is stone actually, layers of the infill stones. Now, these are impressive and beautiful structures, but they're very simple. At that time, it's a simple symmetrical layout with a simple repetition of that arching vault, and that's what it was. And we looked at this, and that's a project of a student who's now working with us, where we're saying, okay, we can pick that up, but we can make that parametric variation, and we can also express the beauty of the structure on the exterior. In the Gothic, it's all on the interior, and on the exterior you have a different structure, you covered with a roof. So to have an inside-out Gothic with parametric variation, but also not only have compression, but to have tension as well. So tensile structures, and then to work with that variation all the way through the profiling of the individual arches. Also, we would go away from a semicircle to a parabola or catenary, in fact, to optimize, and that gives a different character, different beauty. Anyway, I just want to show this was, you know, early, let's say, Tectonism research at the AA Design Research Lab, and we get a lot out of that. It's a lot of beautiful, and we did over the years at ZHCODE, it's a lot of these vaulting projects with parametric variation for various public buildings in the Middle East. And of course, the great precursor, Gaudi, and his form-finding technique of the catenary, which then also, of course, influenced throughout. These are, you know, the move away from invented forms or preconceived Platonic geometric forms to allowing structural forces to find a form and deliver a form. Of course, in Gaudi, the world is still overarching symmetry conditions, but we do have, you know, columns start to tilt. There's an overall equilibrium. So this technique is fascinating, and we at AADL, we do a lot of this material form finding processes. So it's a kind of physics, exploitation of material properties, of gravity, of other implied forces, of stretching, etc. And I just click very quickly through that, because that is a kind of early, let's say, that's where we begin studios often, playing with elastic materials or with, here's kind of pouring these kind of cones of sand and let them intersect and find form. So we're talking about this in terms of material computation, because there's a strong correlation between these and then certain algorithms of form finding we also utilize, where again, when with the algorithmic generative way of working, we do not have preconceived forms, but we allow a tool, an algorithm, in an equilibrium system, for instance, of a particle string system or other agent-based system, etc., and meant to generate a form, which is at the same time an optimization process. So I was publishing the Parametrism 2.0 with AD, and I was presenting a lot of contemporary work in the field, in the movement, and they're basically all parametrism. But they're moreover all tectonism examples, but they're usually quite small project or just theoretical projects. One very important contributor was Mark Burry, who was for many years the chief architect of the Sagrada Familia effort to continue and complete the Sagrada Familia using computational tools to follow on from Gaudi's, let's say, analog tools. So Gaudi, there's examples of Dieste, there's of course Otto. I was a student of Otto in Stuttgart. I was lucky to see him lecture and visit his institute and observe what they're doing. And this is again, of course, he's really opened up that world of what we call it material computation of form finding, of structural form finding, and some impressive early examples like the 1972 Munich Olympic Stadium. And I also want to mention Philip Bloch, who we're working with. He looked a lot at these masonry structures as these vaulting structures, and you can see that there's not only a certain optimization of the global form, but then a particular way of laying out the stones. And what he developed is a sophisticated way of doing this so-called graphic statics method, which doesn't work with forces, but just has a geometric equilibrium, let's say, algorithm, and using Rhino Vault, the plug into Grasshopper, to allow, and that's very important, to have that compression only structure optimized for an arbitrary underlying layout, which could be irregular, like here, with the irregular support points and a regular plan. Also this blending, blob-like blending, and different heights even. And then there's the ability to calculate and optimize and a very thin stone structure, as you can see in Venice. There was a pavilion he constructed. So these are the examples of tectonism and the way engineering sophistication interfaces with this new paradigm in architecture. So we architects should know and learn about these techniques, these possibilities, and there's a perfect congenial fit, because we were anyway interested in that adaptive variety of our plan layouts, this adaptive integration into complex irregular sites, complex and more variegated internal distributions of spaces. And then these kind of systems help a lot to maintain that lightness and thinness and optimization of structure, even in the face of a much more complex spatial configuration, and not just in a simple symmetrical. What is quite nice here, this kind of idea of articulating the fabrication. So these plates come together, and he allowed these steps to be visible on the outside, so you can strongly see the shift in direction of the stone, and on the inside he applied some kind of carving to make it more smooth. But we are paying attention to these expressive features as well, which are coming out of the fabrication logic. I mean, some of these ways of modeling is really truly magical, because these equilibrium systems can be put together without mortar, without strong linkages. It's just a mutual compressive holding. In this case, there's a kind of cable loop tying together the elements of the model. And if you clip that, the whole thing falls down. So we have been working with Philip Block, and we developed some pavilions. We also looked at these beautiful staircases, which have a compressive, similar structural logic of compressive forces only. And of course, we're then relying on the members of such a puzzle become quite complex, so we need to rely on computational fabrication of CNC guided stone cutting with hot wires and or saws. Anyway, we've been onto this for quite a while with AADRL as well, looking at primary and secondary stress directions. You get a kind of contemporary, a more subtle nervy-like articulation of waffle slabs, for instance, which recognize where the support points are, and we can also apply this reticulation to shells. So we looked at these kind of, it's a church by Felix Candela, which consists of, it's a beautiful church with 3 independent high-power shells, which poise and balance each other, and then they just connect at one point. And we generated this into this kind of optimized grid shell, and we made a new kind of funnel-like connection. So it's a kind of 21st century tectonism version of that Candela shell. And you can see that there's a certain beauty arriving, which is similar to the beauty of nature, because there's a complexity and coherency. So there's a kind of organic differentiation and complexity, which is awe-inspiring, and one knows that there's a lot of intelligence built in. Similar with an organism that had evolved for thousands of years, there's a lot of inbuilt intelligence and performativity, and somehow the intuitive that comes through. And it is also, of course, like with natural organisms, that beauty is always a high performance morphology, which we perceive as credible and beautiful. We love also tensile structures. I mean, that the tailoring, that these anticlastic double curved surfaces, you get that incredible lightness and thinness of a certain magic of these structures. So we love to work with those, and this is a clear form finding where you really have to work with and optimize the force flow to get efficient results. The idea of a column as light element as well, and it comes out of the if you work with textiles, you can't bring it to the point. You have to capture a larger zone. And naturally this comes together, and it generates a new characterfulness. Recently, we just we participated in this competition to have these high-power shells as a super light bridge embedded also in a historic concept in Milan, to the roof and floor independently crossing over. So 3D printing allows for this new level of intricacy in the structuration, nearly like a material designing a materiality with its kind of gradient properties. And here's a number of tools come together. So it's the initial shell form with a particle string system, where the curvature is optimized. and then running the topology optimization across to find an optimized distribution of force lines where we could strengthen the surface or alternatively take away in the in-between. So we were running these algorithms across a surface. You can do that. And then we developed the idea of how to translate this. So there's always decision-making, design decision-making, of course, as well. You know, we didn't extrude them simply. We just made a kind of thinning out through this concave scooping. And then we also aligned the perforation density with that at the same time. So we have two ways of translating that, and it makes for very intricate organic look and feel. And you know, the aim is, of course, you also feel it is super light. There's a super lightness in this. We're trying to translate this now currently also with aluminum printing. And we did a very similar approach, the shell with the overlay of topology optimization in a pavilion project. And then the next stage was, rather than 3D printing that one-to-one, we had to go in and do a geometric optimization to decompose it into elements which are developable. So we're working with sheet metal. So then we have another set of algorithms to drive out all the twisted surfaces and find developable surfaces. And then it's built with sheet metal. So we had to show at our gallery in London a lot of 3D printing, a lot of digital fabrication, discrete elements, aggregations with a robot arm. So whenever we have intricacy and complexity and variation, we bring in these tools to, you know, bring them into the realm of the economical. But also, of course, it also means that you can make variation. You can tailor these. Each one is a print. It's still currently relatively expensive, but it's not astronomical. And as manufacturers, contractors, etc., keep investing in this technology, I think the prices will come down, and in the end, you get, you know, very reasonable, a new world of products and spaces. So we like, you know, to show, for instance, the tool path. It becomes an you know, plasticity heightening aspect rather than something to smooth out. So it's a different world. I mean, you can see here, this is the new world of tectonism. These elements is the older parametrism world of say foldism and blobism, which we still have permanently in our gallery. So this is quite sophisticated 3D printed, I mean, with the robot arm onto a formwork, which is itself has the global geometry is actually it's a hot wire cut. So it's a ruled surface, and again that gives it a particular geometry. So we're not talking it's always only NURB surface. We have, you know, these ruled surfaces to do with hot wire cutting. We have curved folding. We have active bending. We have tensile. So there's a lot of, and I think we have an eye for distinguishing these, and in the end, understanding that, and again, various types of 3D printing. This is a fiberglass with carbon fiber reinforcement. And again, hot wire cutting for formwork. This is about 25 times faster, or 50 times faster actually, than milling it. And then, so when we started working with concrete formwork and concrete elements in our buildings, we always went, you know, milling the mold and then laying the fiberglass and so on. This is a very expensive and relatively slow process. Of course, it's still better than hand carving things. But this kind of hot wire cutting, and then this has a particular, of course, geometry and characterfulness to it. Okay, so we're looking at also developing our own kind of initial simple algorithms. So if you think about a shell and the way the forces flow, it's the steepest path to the support point is also like water would run down. So that is a proxy, an initial proxy for the force flow. So we're generating these lines, and then we can variously interpret those. Extrude ribs, or fewer and stronger ribs, and make the contrast between surface and ribs. So these all are then articulatory, or we just crease them like this. Maybe less effective, but it's still and you get an overall reduction in the thickness and overall strengthening. Or we also then know where we could cut openings in these shells. And I think that's beautiful, intricate, and it's guided by these structural rationalities and these algorithms. So we can generate some beautiful, ornate, festive halls, large span. And this is for palace in Algiers. And I think, you get, and we wanted to generate variety. So we have different vaulting, different reticulations, for different sizes of, but we also like that effect of having that tectonic expressiveness, giving character and festive character to the great halls and have variety there. This is a study at the GSD. We did at Harvard with my students. So working with Frei Otto's bool thread model, which was originally a path optimization for urban settlements, but these abstract models could also be used for load path optimization. So this was an idea of creating irregular shells and allowing material form finding there. This was then also later digitally translated, and we're getting the program was at Google campus, and so we're trying here with different sizes of shells, shells within shells, courtyards, but you can see at the scale of a Google campus, it becomes quite monotonous already, even we're trying different colors. And we then I had various teams there. This is grid shells. This is based on catenaries. And catenaries within catenaries, actually, for you have a major catenary and then a secondary catenary. And all of them are beautiful and intricate and varied and differentiated, but at that scale, they become monotonous. And then I said, well, these three are internally differentiated, but they could also coexist because they share similarity with each other. And I didn't do that in the final, but the idea came up that we need all of these three types or more to generate more diversity, more distinction between the different parts of such a large campus. And they will still harmonize because they're following the principles of parametrism and tectonism, and there's a kind of logic to them, and you can also nest one and within the other. So these are the ideas which generate, and when I look at, and this is not our work, this is Achim Menges and the Stuttgart Institute, you can see they're generating a pavilion every year, and there are characterful differences and similarities. So you can have, similarity through similar materiality or similarity through geometry, and there's still a lot of variety. So this is very important to have what I call a network of similitude and differences to compose, to generate, make a new language. And I'm not going to talk about what I call the semiological project, but to generate a spatio-morphological language to really systematically articulate the variety of offerings in something like a large Google complex. So, and it is for me a bit like these kind of ecologies of multiple species and geological forms. And there's always that sense, it's not arbitrary, the way they interlink, the way they migrate and vary, the way the water flows, the green becomes more lush. There's a difference between the north side and south sides. of these mountains, where there's snow and where there's vegetation. So there's laws. Basically, these are laws of scripting correlations. So if you have a parametric scripting-based, rule-based set of architectural methodologies, you can regenerate something like an ecology of species, a continuous and lawful differentiation. And that is actually beautiful and legible. The complexity doesn't become menacing. Anyway, so we do, we have tensile structures, we have curved folding. So we have different species, all have their rationality, their logic, their optimization, and they all have their share. They're part of an organic world, but they're also very, very different. And of course, it's non-trivial. It's very tough to, each of these tools, has an underlying science with research papers where which takes years and years to build up, and it's there in that movement, in that ecosystem, around grasshopper, for instance. And I think we should utilize them and work with them and generate that new paradigm of architecture. But it has a kind of skill threshold which isn't easily crossed. Not only learning the tools and the software and the scripting, it's getting more easier and handy, but also understanding the underlying principles, knowing what one is doing and have an intuitive grasp over that. So these are we building that up, and I can see how hard it is. Even in the firm like Zadid Architects, we have our specialist research groups and experts, and the dissemination to everybody is not easy. But again, so we have computational intelligence, the constraints of the manufacturing logic directly inbuilt already in the modeling, so that whatever the script delivers is downstream executable. Super thin aluminum shell with the curved folding element. So environmental issues. We have all these tools now in engineering, not only structurally defined element analysis, but sun exposure maps, etc. And if you take these, we can then correlate onto it or use it as an underlaying for scripting the geometry differentiation. So it's a kind of transcoding of that sun exposure map directly into geometry differentiation. And so that's important. So you get these buildings which are not just glass envelopes, and this is in Iraq, it's very hot there, but we get a structure which is differentiated, which looks differently from different sides, and which is also a good orienting landmark in the city then, because you know where is north, south, east, west, in which side of the tower you are. It's a better landmark than a kind of symmetrical landmark, which maybe doesn't tell you where you are relative to this. So this is just something which is going on site right now, actually. And again, that theme of the atrium is important in the where you can just open up in the north side. So we have a number of these projects where the primary driver is shading, sun exposure, but here it's also breeze and wind. So that's the project in Saudi Arabia, very harsh climate as well. And this we use that. And also what you get is that these projects get a sense of regional embeddedness. There's a kind of parametric regionalism if you work with the current climate, and you can also learn from the morphology. So there's this kind of courtyard type, a little bit the social expectation coming as well. So we have this kind of capturing of the wind, so the courtyard is shifted. Also, at the same time, good for the sun. I mean, you have to be lucky with this distribution that wind and sun coincide here. Very kind of solid side walls with very small slots, and then you can see the umbrellas do something similar. They have this oculus and they're tilted as well into the wind and away from the sun. So you have two very different systems exposed to the same set of parameters. They become similar to each other. So you get kind of congenial affiliation and mutual aesthetic let's say, coherency, because the similar parameters impact on very different systems. So you have both radical difference and radical, let's say, similarity. And so this is something which we actually built and was executed. Again, another little project where we're working with shells and reticulation and ribbing to allow in for the light. So that's also then possible to start thinking about large projects, tower projects. And of course, there the structure becomes very dominant, as well as of shading elements would be important as well. So there's just a number of examples where we, over the years, generated these kind of differentiated skeletons. And I tell you, it's not easy in terms of execution. It's efficient, you can unburden the core, you get opportunities for atria, like you'll see here, it's fantastic experience done on the inside, but it's very expensive still. But I mean, it's a thrill. You get this fantastic hollowed out interior space because the structure is on the outside. But it's also very strongly expressive. And we have these unbelievable bridges and suspending, some restaurants and breakfast spaces in that void. And then the elevators are panoramic. So, but I have to say that, so we have some examples, but it's still a tough call. So the industry needs to develop a lot to allow this to become less exceptional, if you like. But it's nice where you know where you are, even in the private room. You get the kind of the structure you can gauge. The structure is more filigree, you're more high up. If it's very heavy, you're more further down. So you also remember where you are, because this is a complex of towers, all connected by a podium, and you might not remember in which outside. And then you see a tower from the outside, and then you move around and you come up somewhere, you don't know where you are. So there's also this, and of course, Beijing is a great example for a massive, huge columnless space. And the idea here is these petals. They have two touchstone points on the side and one major column, which is at the same time, again, that light funnel. So you're getting these big petals with the light funnel column, and the central space will bring in a lot of light. And that's quite a nice feature. I mean, these big glass domes coming in here, we have kind of structural principles. We don't directly view the structure, except it comes out through here in the orientation space. Back to towers. So we're moving from this paradigm to this paradigm. And there are two things. Of course, it's the optimization, the variation. The principle here, the idea here is that the core is not part of the structure. Then you can do something like Roger. You just have elevators on the outside, or you have elevators flying through the atrium. It is better to, if you wanted to the structure is not utilizing the core, and it is not utilizing every floor. It is a series of sky lobbies, primary floors, and then other floors can be hung, so they can be more flexible. And it's a very different concept. And then to use topology optimization to work with this, you can inbuild the atrium. You have maybe irregular placed support points as well, and you get this kind of filigree structure. And then you fill in the floors, and you drop through the elevators, or you're flying with your drone through them. So this is, I mean, we've done one tower with a strong exoskeleton, which is differentiated, and then you can also see you can have different types of accommodation. And anyway, I wanted to show this AADRL work first of all, where we play with how we interface. You can have the slab coming out, receding. There's a lot of play and variation in that theme of the topology optimization. So it's not the same, because sometimes you have bridges, and how are they asymmetric loads being absorbed? And what is beautiful here is it's somehow absorbed organically and comes out relatively elegant. And and there's different versions. There are many different systems. You know, systems, voxelized systems, iso-biso, or you have stick systems like Peregrine. And so we learn a lot of experiment, and this versioning of this. The idea has always been not to use every floor as loads, and to seek out that strong differentiation between bottom, middle, and top, and then to explore that space. And what is also then the translation, we had 3 versions of translations. We looked at steel translation, concrete translation, timber translation. So you have different types due to the different, let's say, systems of optimization. And then we have translated into different materialities. And then the tectonic detail is coming out of that. So that's the kind of matrix of having steel, timber, concrete, and the different tools, amoeba, topos, and peregrine. And then we're getting different characterfulness, and you get a variation out of that. And we also like the idea then to say, okay, making these cluster towers and having a more 3-dimensional connectivity with these kind of bridge connections and voids. So the idea is atria and voids and connections between towers and intervisibility between towers. So this is all student work within 1 semester. And then the idea of exploring this visually also, because what's exciting about this is that, let's say, 3-dimensional freedom, that the vistas across levels, the vistas through, because there's no core obscuring it in the center, and then the idea of hanging mezzanines. And we get this kind of corporate headquarters, or let's say a conference center suspended in the middle, with a lot of interest and complexity. Sorry, this is the next one. And maybe a big multi-level lobby. There's also a theater somewhere in here as well. And it's a very different character. This is the kind of steel tower. Now we could make the floors very thin. You can make them kind of composite, or let's say, got the phrase, you activating the top and bottom surface in a monocoque. And finally, just a few images. So that's the vision of research, and this is the, let's say, the translation into build reality of these ideas, principles in a big tower, which has some special innovation in its fabrication, because we're prefabricating the in fiber concrete and using it as a lost formwork. So we're bringing 2 pieces of fiber concrete together, tie them together, and then around the rebar, and then pouring. And that's the kind of world first. And you get the beautiful kind of expressiveness of the structure when it comes down. A large cantilevering on the balconies. Fantastic wide, long balconies at the top. The column split at the top as well becomes more filigree. and then at the top is the social spaces overlooking. So I'm closing with this image, and thank you. Maybe there's a few minutes to discuss.
Wow. Thank you so much, Patrick, for that. I mean, our global Filipino architects and our future global Filipino, the students are really on awe of what we have seen on your presentation. But before we go to the Q&A, we'll have the reaction from our three pre-selected chapter presidents from UAP, who will give their takeaway from your presentation.
Yes, please.
Hello, Patrick. Good afternoon. I mean, good day to you.
Hello.
Very nice presentation. How do you do?
I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you. It's a wonderful presentation. We're very excited and we're very happy to be with you today. Thank you so much for that. So with great anticipation of having you with us and with the limited awareness, personally from my side, of the full scale of the style developed by you with Zaha Hadid Studio and the rest of the fellow architects, I was supposed to cite that we are about to witness the dawn of a new architectural epochal style. But of course, after your presentation, witnessing that, I believe that's no longer the case. So in fact, we are now within that age of such epochal style that we have already evolved and spawned its own subsidiary style. So thank you very much, because you've given, even though it was just brief, but you have definitely given us enough information to give us a further idea about these subsidiaries, particularly on the foldism, the blobism, swarmism, and ultimately the Tectonism, which we have presented today. So now, parametricism is a term coined by you in 2008, which originated itself from the parametric design based on equations and algorithms. It's a massive reliability on programs or computers to manipulate equation for the design purpose. So I would say companies having these technologies at their disposal are truly having a great advantage of transforming ideas from line to design to physical form. Surely technology is being further developed, innovated, and hopefully commercially improved so that slowly, if in a not so distant future, it will be commercially accessible to all. So yes, so not only the designers, but also the manufacturers and the builders. So, so I guess for now, only privileged minority will have the capability and actually to design and build the parametric style in architecture. So any thoughts how far in the future before majority will have an access to the technology of parametric design and construction?
So in terms of design, I think the access is actually, it's available now for students around the world, because there is a lot of help and resource, a lot of inspiration. And I'm not talking primarily about Instagram, but I'm talking about, YouTube tutorials, lectures, workshops in terms of the world around Grasshopper in particular, with all these plugins which make it easy and you can learn online, participate with us, or you join a workshop. There's not only of course in London there's been a lot of that, but in Europe, in America, but also in China. So there's at Tongji University, for instance, where I'm also teaching. We're doing an international PhD there, but there's regular workshops with international students where you can come for 10 days, 2 weeks. You learn the new tools and you actually create structures and prototypes on site. They have a lot of facilities there. There's Philip Yuan, who's a great protagonist of Tectonism actually in China, and so that is maybe closer for you friends to go up. And I suspect you have also such departments in the Philippines where you have research and investment and learning. And I think these tools become ever more accessible. When it comes to the commercial translation, there's a lot has happened in the last 10 years in terms of major contractors investing. And I mean, the whole world of BIM helps a lot. This idea of file to factory, increasingly, that we don't have to go back to drawings. It's very difficult. And a lot of specialist subcontractors who are equipped with robotic systems, with milling, with CNC. So we have, I mean, we relied on that, of course, to execute what we're doing. And the surcharges, the extra you pay for having, for instance, all the elements different. I mean, I didn't show that, but the Lise Tower in Beijing, where we have an oval footprint and we have a swelling, we have the tallest atrium in the world, and we have this kind of shingled facade, which gradually flattens out. Every single panel is different, but it was relatively economically. So because these facade contractors are now set up like this, that they have these parametric systems where they can create these glass panels, and also the logistic behind that, barcoding them and knowing which element is going where, etc. So it is happening. So, and eventually, I mean, when it comes to structure in particular, these optimizations really make a difference, because if you make everything the same and you don't change system, and you don't, there's a lot of material, let's say, wastage potentially. So we can, we can make the floor slabs lighter. We can also think about fabrication optimization and getting more prefabrication into the system and with precision. So I think eventually these structures will be actually more economical than the traditional, because they're materially lighter. Similarly, with respect to, let's say, if you have shading elements, if you adapt them and optimize them, you get more efficiency, and then you thin them out and let them not be there at all where you don't need them. Then you also get, in a sense, more natural light still in there, more views, and the lighter footprint there too. So eventually, these systems must be more economical, but that really implies that all the design disciplines and the contractors and manufacturers have switched fully into a digital operation. It's a bit like now if you print, if you use a Xerox machine or print, it doesn't, they don't care anymore that the 100 pages are different. There's actually you lose less toner if you somehow optimize the pages rather than making exactly the same page. So that is a dream of that. It is an important aspect, but the driver for me is not only economical in this case, of course. It is also what is beautiful about it, that you get this legible variation, and that the built environment becomes more legible, organic, less monotonous, and less kind of also visually chaotic. If you switch system drastically, or you have very different styles right next to each other, that generates a kind of urban image which becomes very chaotic and disorienting quite quickly. I mean, I call that garbage spill urbanization. We see that everywhere. So I'm not talking about a unified plan, but I'm talking about if the culture of architecture globally, and it's a world architecture, converges towards this, we get more harmony in our cities. It's a little bit like in modernism, where you actually had the convergence of an international style. It was more monotonous, but you have some coherent, beautiful examples of that. If you look at, the Tel Aviv, the white city of Tel Aviv, or you look at Miami Art Deco district, and certain, certain parts of Manhattan. They're actually quite beautiful if you have or Chicago, the Chicago influenced by Mies van der Rohe. You get sort of beautiful, coherent city districts. And that's where we haven't seen it in the 21st century because we're too fragmented. So that's the next element. But it requires the economics to become compelling for this.
Wow, thank you, Patrik. That's very good. I have another question, Christian, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
So, Patrik, I hope you don't mind. I'll take you a bit out of this world for a moment, because my question somehow related to the dependencies on the technology and algorithm. It's not impossible that in the near future, mankind will develop an AI with consciousness. So, isn't there a certain pattern going on with the style and this design and also with the algorithm that although it may be variant, but it may come, it might be in danger of becoming predictable. So in such case, especially if with the birth of an AI consciousness, how do you think can architects compete with that?
Well, we're not competing. We are kind of, I think there's going to be a symbiotic relationship where we're using the AI systems, for instance, also to avoid monotony, because the AI systems, they could also become creative. And I don't think that the results are so easily predictable as you think. In particular, if you use topology optimization, for instance, these are evolutionary systems, and it's full of surprises. And also, you never have a fixed systems. There's always parameter settings, even with topology optimization. And the outcome is quite sensitive to this. And there isn't a single, optimum, because you always have multiple constraints, multi-objective searches. And in the end, I think we're going to always be the interlocutors, and where we, on the one hand, participate in pushing forward and developing systems, but as virtuoso users of these systems, I think that it's a fantastic palette for artistic creation, where you're also looking for characterfulness and differentiation, which your client would also be looking for. But at the same time, you would look for affiliation and embeddedness in a context. And I think that so I don't think it's really competitive with the architect as the orchestrator of the design team and all the intelligences. And I think AI kind of systems are very welcome, and it just mean that we can explore more avenues and we can resolve more complex tasks, which we would otherwise have a vision and a dream for, but then we couldn't do it. So I see a strong kind of, I'm very happy, and we're starting to, we can see the AI flowing into the field, and I'm very welcome, and we shouldn't be scared of it. We should welcome it and work with it.
Thank you very much, Patrik. Thank you for indulging my question. Okay. CP Christian, we can now go to the next.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting a lot of response and comments while reading all those comments and a bunch. There's one from Qatar. Thank you, Patrik, for such mind-blowing design, so futuristic, and it was so impressive. There's this one unique comment here that I really need to say. This is from Dean Chona. Is he a human? Are you an alien? You're just imposing your cities here on Earth? So that, I mean, there's also a comment here from Michael Ringpeace from our another platform from the Facebook Live, watching from UAP Ilocos Norte, Lawag City, Philippines. Very futuristic design that challenges local architects to dig deeply in conceptualizing the uniqueness of our design that eventually introduced to our fellow Filipinos. I mean, this presentation that you showed us, challenges our fellow architects here, especially in the Philippines. Okay, so we'll have now our reactor. May we call on CP Anna?
Take the cage for a
Si Piana, you're on mute.
Okay, here we go. Sorry. So good evening, everyone. Good evening, CP Christian. What can I say is that thank you so much, Sir Patrick, for that excellent presentation. And thank you for showing us your works and the knowledge you have shared. Wow, you have an extremely wide imagination, sir. And I think your works are a huge challenge to structural engineers. I can't imagine how they deal with it. So thank you for sharing us your works. It will be helpful to us Filipino architects who are, honestly speaking, and in my opinion, some of us are behind in terms of advanced or modern design and in construction methods. Maybe because we are also behind of this technology compared to you and other countries. You are such a wonderful speaker too, and you inspire us. I hope we can have you again on our next webinars. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. I mean, talking about engineers, I mean, actually, everybody likes a challenge. And we have fantastic engineers here in London, but also around the world. And it's very important collaboration. This collaboration with engineers is quite intensive and stimulating. So they really have an impact on these designs.
Yeah.
It's not just we do something and then they have to kind of pull their hair out. They're brought in early on.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you,
All
sir.
right. Thank you, CP Ana. We have now CP Agustin from Malolos Republica to say his reaction.
Thank you, CP Christian. Sir Patrick, that was an amazing presentation. Very impressive. Zaha Hadid and your approach to architecture never fails to amaze us, most especially me as an architect. We are deeply honored to hear and learn from you today. You inspired many architects and future architects, most especially Filipino architects, to go beyond their imagination in designing. Sharing parametricism principle, including Tectonism, brought new understanding, not only to me, but for many architects. How you combine algorithm, geometry, equilibrium, and generate it to an amazing and elegant structure are really mind-blowing. We hope that more Filipino architects engage with this kind of architectural approach in the future. And I hope that to see those design in the Philippines in the future also. You mentioned Sagrada Familia a while ago, and I hope to see its finished product in the future also. I don't want to get your time because I know that we have many questions in the chat box. So Sir Patrick, in behalf of the Global Filipino Architects, thank you very much for your impressive presentation.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
All right, Patrick, let me introduce you to one of the celebrated architects in the Philippines. Architect Pelino Palafox is my former boss. So, Architect Palafox, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Christian, and thank you, Patrik Schumacher.
Hello.
You and Zaha did very inspiring work because your buildings are always unique, memorable, and identifiable, but they don't overwhelm the city. Somehow it blends into the repertoire of the urban fabric. My question is, we call you star architects, star architecture, the media policy guys, and how do we address now this pandemic to our architecture, this COVID virus? Because one international conference that I attended, an infectious disease expert were telling us, this is where the Council for Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat, Chicago, and I'm a very active member. So it's Christian, I'm a fellow there. So that this COVID could be, that was April last year, COVID-19, 20, 21, 22, or the rest of our lives. So it's happening now. So there would be a need to retrofit your buildings to consider this pandemic. That's one. So there are more natural light, ventilation, and so on. And the next one is, the next crisis they say is climate change. So that will be a challenge for architects. And I think you also are all studying what Hippocrates said, 400 BC, Nurse Nightingale, and all those guys. That buildings should be designed like healthcare facilities. So the challenge to us will be how to make them aesthetically pleasing with a healthcare facility building. So it's a big challenge if we need to retrofit them and how to future-proof our cities with our architecture. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing, inspiring us. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for the question. That's very interesting. I mean, of course, we have thought a lot about recently about the city post-COVID. And what I see now in London, actually, we're opening up again, but everything is, most of things are outdoors. So in Soho, you know, the streets are full of tables, all the restaurants, there's more, one feels more safe and it's more welcoming. And I do believe that the cities possibly should become more pedestrian and believe in pedestrianization, active travel, in cycling. Now you have all these electric bikes as well, which really allows you to go, you know, you can 5-10 kilometers is no problem with an electric bike, and it's still healthy. We have all these, you know, micro mobility elements. So that's one element. Healthy pedestrianized city centers with a lot of outdoor social spaces. That's what I'm looking for, and what we should contribute to. And I think the work patterns will change. In our firm, we're working totally from home right now, and the moving back to the office will be different. It will be gradual, but also it will never be complete. So a lot of people will work from home for some days, and the character of the office is very different, full of meeting space and social spaces. And you showed the way you showed some of our projects, these towers, these atria, these intervisibility, inter-awareness. One comes together for co-location synergies, for collaboration, for information exchange. That's why we want to be part of the city. When we do concentrated work, we can do that at home also. So that's one element which I think is important. And it's also more healthy to have a lot of breeziness, outdoor activities, and we also, you know, natural ventilations and more ventilation in our spaces, more openness in our spaces. So I think that's one thing which is very important. The other thing which I like is now as we have a telecommunication, we need to start thinking about integrating the telecommunication with the physical environment more. So that the video conferencing feeds into our spaces, with larger screens. I'm also thinking about cyberspace and the more three-dimensional experience of remote participation. So that's my current research project, that actually at the AADRL, this idea of a cyber-physical integration or cyber-urban integration. I think that's because we will have more mediated interactions, but we should not have them in isolation. We could be a small group of people which then get expanded by another group of people from around the world. So I don't think of this telecommunication as something which only happens in isolation. So we need to really think of a lot of interfaces and windows into virtual communications zones within our buildings, so that we can both be in a space with others and be in virtual communications, rather than having to choose whether I'm going to the office or I'm staying at home telecommunicating. So that's an interesting theme, I think. And the health element is, of course, important. My feeling is that probably with the vaccination and so on, that's going to be less urgent. What remains permanent is that shift towards an awareness of the possibility of telecommunication and teleworking. And that has an impact. And I think we need to allow a lot of entrepreneurial imagination and freedom on the part of developers, on the part of staff and companies to find out how to opportunize on this discovery for better work and live experience.
Great, thanks. And I think the best city now with the Lady Mayor Paris, making Paris a 15-minute city. That's one. And right, your observation, but we in the creative professions, we need to have face-to-face collaboration also. So maybe at least once a week, we test ideas along the way. And thanks very much. So it's a big challenge, especially with climate change, 2030 challenge. And
Yeah,
also
climate change is a big one as well. Yeah, I mean, we're having a task force in the office, and we are taking it very seriously.
Even our real estate clients, I tell them it's no longer location. I tell them internet, connectivity. Thanks a lot. Nice conversation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Architect Palafox. Patrick, we now go to the the real Q&A portion. Let me call Architect. There's one question here. Of all the projects, both big and small, you have been involved in, which of those would you say have changed and impacted your own perception as an architect?
Well, I mean, there are many, and I think, of course, for me, the first building I've ever designed, I mean, was Zaha, and then saw the built reality. That was an interesting shock. The shock that it worked out, that it was actually successful, and also, the scale was different from what I expected. It was kind of a great experience. It was a beautiful confrontation of built reality with one's own imagination. That is Vitra. And then in Rome, Maxi is another one I want to mention. That's deep in the history of our firm. But more recently, I mean, it's every opening of our buildings is a new surprise. And so for the Dome des Monts is a very strong project in Seoul. Also incredibly memorable, and all the events which take place. And recently the Lisa Tower, that atrium experience is also, you get it really works, and it's a pleasure. And we are now imagining our own working environment differently. And so I think makes a difference. Space and environment, and could be uplifting, could be energizing. And that's what I experience in our buildings, and I think that makes architecture so important. And I think if you think about, particularly if you're in a more affluent life, if we've reached, if we have pulled ourselves out of the kind of, let's say, basic material provision, what really is the next levels, what we want to inspires us to more is the environment, to make a more beautiful, working environment, home. Architecture is really where I think it always motivates us to do more. I think it's incredibly important, and architecture needs to be free to deliver that.
What's currently on your plate now? Are you working on a really exciting? Are we expecting a new thing from Patrick?
We're doing a number of district scale projects. I gave you a glimpse of kind of Unicorn Island in Chengdu, and we're really doing all of the buildings. And I mean, that's a challenge, but it's also amazing, so that we're in charge of the in-between and the landscaping and outdoor spaces and the variety, orchestrating a whole variety of buildings. I mean, that's exciting.
How are they as an architect, as a client? China.
Yeah, the client is a Chinese developer together with the government there. It's a beautiful location on the lake, and it is it has about many buildings of various scales, and with a lot of beautiful outdoor space, and it's fully pedestrianized. We put the road underneath, and it's already under construction. So it's so that district scale multi-building integration, that's really a new level of challenge, let's say, and excitement.
Okay, we have here now, how important is the element of research to an architectural practice?
So it's a fantastic if one can, if the firm is large enough to afford research groups. So we have a number of research groups in our company. We have 4 research groups. The main one is ZHCODE, developing geometry, and and algorithms, but also we have a social, social modeling group, and we have a corporate space building group, and we have a VR group now as well. So it's really important, and absent having one's own research groups, what stands as a good substitute, and we also have at the same time, is working with universities. Through teaching, through PhDs, to use the universities and collaborate with the universities is incredibly important. I don't think we could, because it's very difficult in a commercial setting with deadlines and timelines very short for competitions, and to be innovative if one doesn't have a background rolling research process which one can continuously then bring forward into the applications. But there's a time that the delay is more like 5 to 10 years. But which client gives you 5 years for develop your concept design? That's kind of incredibly important.
Yeah.
I mean, the big companies all have research. And Foster has a lot of research. We have a lot of research.
Yeah.
But as I said, AADRL is another indispensable force for Hadid architects, and that's been going on for 20 years now, over 20 years, with a large group of students full of energy and skilling up and working for 18 months. And a lot of our staff are teaching, so they're also multiplying and bringing in new talent and developing new ideas, but also maturing them to the point that we can then start using them in the competitive work.
All right, there's one comment here from Ronel Iriga from Rinconada. With your approach in architecture, we might be looking now and listening to the future Pulitzer Prize winner. So yeah, I mean, I strongly agree with this statement. Let me call now Nico from Cebu for the question.
Hello, I'm just gonna share the presentation, and then CP and CP Geraldine will read the questions. Okay, CP Yen and CP Geraldine.
Yeah, I'll do it first while waiting for CPN. But first of all, let me congratulate Mr. Patrik for such an amazing presentation this afternoon. Actually, it's a confirmation that architecture is not just basically visual arts itself, no, but also the combination of science and mathematics, having the algorithms and all these rhythms. So it's really amazing. So more than the challenge of it is the inspiration that it has brought not only to the professional people, professional architects here, but also for the students that are with us here in the Zoom. So we are very much thankful for that, Mr. Patrik. So for the first question, the curvilinear forms are very admirable and pleasant to the senses. Our structural engineers might have heart attack with the artistry of the forms. Seriously, can you please share some inputs on the structural details so we can start having these marvelous designs in the Philippines? Thank you very much. From Architect Felicimo Tejuco.
Well, that's important. You know, that's the whole point of tectonism. Let's say when we started and we just worked with NURB surface and we're interested in fluid transitions between buildings, and let's say we had a more free sculptural approach, looking at the maybe the social functions, but not looking at then we gave these to the architects. Yes, the engineers. Yes, they had a heart attack, and then you have a kind of deep poche of space framing, and it eats up a lot of space. And so that's why it's important to be moved and we develop further, so that the forms, the sculptural forms, are already structural forms, which utilize the curvature for structural efficiency and a very compressed buildup. And so where you actually can squeeze out the poche. So that's the ambition, to have, in particular, if you do a tensile roof, I mean, it's very light. Its shape is engineering driven. But because we have now engineering systems with a lot of variables, we can actually play with these dynamical systems and sculpt the form as structurally optimized form.
Okay, thank you, Sir Patrick. So there's another question from Yan.
Okay, thank you.
Yan.
Yeah, thank you, CPJ. So I'm still in awe that we are live and we are talking to the Patrik Schumacher of Hadid Architects. Actually, the chat box was flooded with many questions, so we've only selected a few. Let's proceed with the next question from UAPSA NU, Micaela Dangaran. So good evening, Architect Patrik. My name is Micaela. These days, there are a lot of software students and professionals are using, from Revit's massing option to make parametric forms to Rhino's capability of 3D. May I know what kind of software is Zaha using when it comes to these kinds of concepts and forms, like Tectonics or Foldism? Thank you.
Well, we're using a lot of different types of software, but let me tell you, the initial sketching at the beginning, where we have a lot of optioneering, is Maya, mostly, with some kind of melt scripting within it. The next stage usually is Rhino and then Grasshopper, of course, to have the parametric modeling and the scripts. And then we also go, in the next stage, we go into Revit. And sometimes Revit isn't so fluid in the geometry space, so we do two things. We do the principal cores, and let's say, and slabs and columns and so on in Revit, and the envelope, perhaps a different system. We used also CATIA. And but now we also gone on to we have developed our own code to have developed tools within Revit. Revit native scripted tools to have more complex geometry capability within Revit. The other thing we're starting to use recently more is Unity and Unreal for simulating the interaction processes in the space and to render. With a new Unreal rendering, you get very fast and good results there. So this is that's roughly it. We sometimes still deliver we also have to deliver sometimes still AutoCAD drawings, but mostly going into the final stage, we're doing BIM modeling, Revit, some projects fully, and the design is Maya, Rhino, Grasshopper. Okay.
Thank you. So, CPJ, should I read the next question?
Okay, for the last question, maybe. I know there are a lot of questions actually, Sir Patrick. We don't know which one to read, but I think this will be the last for now. We will send to Mr. Patrick some of the questions. So from Mr. Tehuco, in terms of density, the scale of your designs range from micro scale towards urban planning. Can you share any specific planning principles that you incorporated in your designs?
Well, yeah, thank you. That's important. So urbanism is a big topic for us because we have a lot of these large urban projects, particularly in China, and we've done other projects in Singapore and in Turkey. So what I believe is, first of all, I don't think we should have a very strict zoning. And since I think the main manufacturing is no longer inside the city, so in terms of pollution anyway in the Western countries, and if anything, there's only small clean manufacturing. We don't have to really zone anymore. We could integrate more strongly work and live district and entertainment retail districts. There should be, so I believe in mixed use, not that all districts are with equal mixity, but I think the one principle for me is mixed use at various grains, and more residential coming into the heart of the city. I think more and more the knowledge economy requires that to reduce commuting and to allow for what I talked earlier, the kind of active travel. That's one major principle. And that we have gradual transitioning and gradual modulation of this mix. I think is very important, and that we allow, one thing I've also believe in is that it's difficult for the planning bureaucracy to get it right. So I think we need more degrees of freedom for entrepreneurs and architects to tease out the co-location synergies and allow each plot to be, and the owner and developer to program it most optimally, which is usually in terms of the affiliations and relations to the surroundings and making the most of that opportunity. And that's why I've been critical of too much government or planning interference. And now particularly, I believe that because of the complexity and intricacy and mixity of an urban fabric, it's very difficult to plan that, and also to leave it to the end users and leave it to the market to somehow discover, and entrepreneurs guiding market to discover what's feasible, what's pleasant, what's efficient. And I think that's very important because it's too complex to plan from the outside. And that's why also we have in our thinking, we believe that it is also important to have many architects integrating. So these master plans shouldn't be huge and can't be single hand. So I believe in a multi-author integrated evolving texture, which means that that the master plan is only very kind of light-footed and abstract. There's a lot of, let's say, the discovery process and filling in process needs a lot of freedom. That's my belief.
All right, thank you again. Once again, thank you so much, Patrik, on behalf of the 25 chapters of the United Architects in the Philippines, in the Middle East, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, KSA, Kuwait, and from the Singapore, Malaysia. You know, Filipinos are all over the world. and
that's great, fantastic.
Especially with our future architects from National University. Thank you so much on their behalf. And with this, we're going to give you, we're going to read the citation for you before we let you go.
Okay.
Let me call Architect Faust, our Director for Committee on Professional Practice from UAP Dubai, to read the citation.
Good evening, Architect. On behalf of UAP Dubai, this certificate is presented to Patrik Schumacher, Principal Architect of Zaha Hadid Architects, for inspiring the global Filipino architects of the Middle East, Singapore, Australia, and the Philippine chapters, in motivating them in your inspiring presentation entitled Zaha ZHA Global Design Laboratory as part of the series of UAP 2021 Talks, Episode 4, and powered by the collaboration of 22 UAP chapters around the world, given this 21st of May 2021 in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. Signed, yours truly, Director of Committee of Professional Practice and Development, and Architect Christian Vasquez, President of UAP Dubai for fiscal year 2021. And thank you for the wonderful presentation.
All right. Again, thank you so much, Patrick.
Thank you, guys. It was a nice occasion. I'm really pleased. So I have a smile on my face, and have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mabuhay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Mabuhay.
Bye.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Christian.
All right. Let me call Architect CP Anna for the closing remarks.
Okay, so once again, I would like to express my appreciation to our speaker for tonight, Mr. Patrik Schumacher, for his very informative and awesome presentation. It's been a pleasure having you tonight, sir. Thank you so much, and I hope we can have you again in the near future. And to all the participants, thank you for being with us. I believe that all of us have gained a better understanding about Tectonism, where design and fashion are mixed. We witnessed the stylistic heightening of engineering and fabrication-based form finding and optimization processes. I'm sure we are really inspired by their works. Though we know that the few hours that we had tonight is not enough to discuss more, but we have to end it here, and we hope to give you another webinars in the near future. Thank you, and we hope to see you again. Keep safe, everyone.
We are currently streaming live at UAP 124 LLC Facebook page. Kindly share our live stream with hashtag UAP with ZHA. Nothing can be more exciting than to give back to our community. For every share you make, the collaborating chapters will be donating 15 pesos to 4 selected community pantry: San Pablo City, Cebu, Malolos, and Manila, Sampaloc. Share the live stream, help the community pantry.
This event is made possible by these collaborating chapters: Abu Dhabi, Aklan, Boracay, Balanga, Bataan, Batacan Peninsulares, Cebu City, Daraga, Cagsawa, 124 Dubai, KSA Eastern Province, KSA Riyadh, KSA Western Region, Kuwait, Malolos Republica, Manila Artisonian, Manila Sampaloc, Oman, Palawan, QC Silangan, QC Pugadlawi, Quezon Province, Rizal Kalayaan 100, San Pablo City, Uapga, and UAPSA National University.
At yan ang mga balitang ating nalakap sa bawat UAP chapter.
Kami ang inyong chapter presidents,
voluntaryong naglilingkod
para sa mga Pilipinong arkitekto. At ito ang
Chapter News Update.